Hello, friends. Welcome to spring. We have been on a little bit of a unintentional break for the last couple of months. Part of permission to be for me, and I think a shared sentiment between Olivia and Becka and myself, is permission to feel into the rhythms that are presenting themselves. And so while we recorded this conversation that you were about to hear a couple months ago, keeping up with the rhythms of life has been challenging of late. And so we appreciate your grace in that as we explore our beingness. Just a few things. If you haven't signed up for the Permission to Be newsletter, our hope is to usually send out one of those a month. You can sign up on permissiontobepodcast.com. And if you are looking for ways to support the podcast, or also support me, Tommy, your co-host, as I continue to build this work of creating holistic, restorative environments in which we can explore our beingness, in which we can practice healing things like mutual aid, and explore theories like abolition to create the world that works for all of us. I invite you over to join my Patreon community. That's patreon.com/Tommy Allgood. There's a couple tiers that you can participate in, and I'll definitely explain more of that later. But just wanted to invite you into that work and process and support. I would really appreciate it. So if that's something that's speaking to you, feel free to reach out to us and ask questions for clarification, or let's have a chat, right? Our conversation today is with Dr. Christena Cleveland, and we center the conversation around the book, God is a Black Woman. And as I'm speaking this, it is a Holy Week for the Christian tradition. And I just think that this conversation really gives us another angle to think about Holy Week and our beingness and God, whatever that, however that shows up for us, right? And so I hope that in this conversation you find something that's freeing for you, something that's liberating for you. And I really hope that you'll go get Dr. Christena Cleveland's book, because it is so impactful, and she shares so generously her experience. And so I'll see you on the other side.
Hello, and welcome to Permission to Be.
Let's hit him with the remix.
Oh, well, y'all got to change that.
Yes.
What do we do?
We leave our F-bombs in, and
Let's tell some stories.
As long as white people are bound, the people in power are bound, they're going to keep us bound to the same thing that they're bound to.
Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And I think out of the overflow of the spirit, the body does.
Challenge some narratives.
Why is that the best that God could offer you?
Mike made it very clear that he did not want to get any of these questions beforehand. So he is getting this question live, raw, for the very first time.
This is...
And I feel like art is the expression of the heart where words fail.
raw,
oh my goodness, I have tears. Oh, y'all are killing it.
unfiltered.
I feel like that's gotta sound strange.
Permission to be.
Actually, my literary agent, when we were talking about what book might I write, he was like, I mean, A Black Man with Hope is an interesting book.
Oh shit!
Hello, friends. Welcome to Permission to Be. It's Tommy here, and yeah, I'm kind of starstruck at the moment because just learned last week we will have the opportunity to talk with Dr. Christena Cleveland. And if you don't know her, if I believed in shame, I would say shame on you, but shame on you. But Dr. Christena Cleveland integrates social science research and spirituality at the intersections of liberation from white supremacy and patriarchy. She is the author of God is a Black Woman. Woohoo! And we are just, wow. Welcome.
Thank you. It's fun to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me permission to be here.
I feel like this has become our tradition for this year, but like we kind of did a check-in randomly the other day, and it's just been a really nice way to start off conversation. So we'd like to ask, how are you coming in to the space today? And in the pursuit of vulnerability, we all answer it. So I will go first since I asked, and say that I am coming in both intention and also in a bit of relaxation. I've had a lot of meetings today and have been like working on multiple fronts. I have a project that I'm trying to finish up, but also is bringing up a lot of internal work of how I'm in relationship with people. Why am I fighting white supremacy the way that I am fighting it with corporations right now? And so, yeah, I did a meditation today, and that kind of set me in a contemplative tone. But what about you, Dr. Cleveland?
I am coming a bit tired and a little bit cranky, to be honest. I'm a morning person, so it's like 7:40 where I am, and so it's a little late for me. I'm usually heading towards bed, so I just noticed that about myself. When I was a grad student, I supervised 25 research assistants in my lab. People were always like, "Don't screw up after 7 p.m." Like Christena will all of a sudden not be a gracious person. Because our lab was open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and they were always just like, "Just be on your best behavior after 7 p.m." She's like turns into a completely different person. So yeah, just noticing that about myself, but also really happy to be here and I'm not feeling cranky about being here. I'm feeling cranky because I was just working on social media and I hate social media.
Say that.
I don't like being squished into a box. I hate that. And so my whole team, we're going to go off social media in April, but we're just finishing out, kind of getting through this book launch. And so I was just working on that for like 3 hours. So I'm like, So I'm glad to have a spacious, just conversation, relationship, just connection, and not this like growth. How can I get people to stop scrolling?
Lord help us.
That makes so much sense, though, that you would be cranky with like your body is like, it's time to wind down. And I've been in this highly like volatile, disrespectful,
dehumanizing,
Yes.
toxic space. Yeah, totally. So, yeah.
Hey friends, I love the check-in just as a way of creating some transition space. And this check-in became really funny because at this point we started having technical difficulties with our recording. So just wanted to give you the context that where we pick back up in the conversation, is after those technical difficulties, and that makes its way into our check-in space.
Shitting me. Okay, well,
Olivia, how are you coming into this space?
let's drink some wine.
Okay, now I'm coming in.
Olivia, you better get it right this time. We've had to start over 2 times because of you.
Jesus.
We're looking for perfection.
As the senior,
Lord.
as the senior
Lord.
citizen here, let's see if I can even. I mean, I am very much the senior citizen. Let's see if I can remember what I said.
Introspective.
I am coming into this space introspective.
Oh.
And I actually am introspective and joyous because you know what? Laughter really is good medicine. And I just feel the endorphins being released the more I laugh. I binge listened to your book, and then I went back and reread with the Kindle copy certain chapters. And one of the things I had communicated to Tommy and Becka throughout is I don't really have questions because I lived so much of this. But what resonated with me most about the book is I have talked a lot and I've even written a lot about what I experienced in terms of actions and specific things that happened. But what you tapped into is what it was like for the events to happen, but how you felt, how it was embodied, how it affected you mentally, how it affected you emotionally. And I just so appreciated voice being given to it. Because I think sometimes if you have not experienced it, some of my friends who haven't had that white evangelical experience, they don't fully, it's like they hear me, but they don't really get what I'm talking about when I'm trying to describe why I left and haven't gone back since 2015. And I just felt like you gave voice to so much of my angst and so many of the experiences, both in my family and in my church and in my professional life, because I'm part of the Great Resignation. All of that, it's just so much of it was parallel. So I feel very introspective.
Third time's the charm, audience. I love that I'm holding right now the joy of the imperfection of this environment and also like the impact of what you said. But I'm really excited to get to the dialogue portion. But Becka, how are you?
Right now, I am joyful because that was a little fun trip we just took. I mean, I think I'm going to stick with that. Like it is that's the emotion that's emoting from me. And I will say that I have been listening to God as a Black Woman for your work, Dr. Christena, for the last 48 hours, whenever I got in the car, whenever I can pop my earpod in. And the way you communicate, the vulnerability in which you graciously show up in, being an empathic person, there's just a deep feeling of having the privilege of getting to hear your story. As a white identifying person, I have experienced emotional religious trauma through my own lens, but it is not the same. And it is not the same that I can understand. And so I was honored to be able to hear that, to hear your words. Listeners, Dr. Christena communicates in a way it's hard to express. You just need to listen, read, sit with, take time, honor. So I guess maybe the word is joy because we were being silly and having fun little glitches. But I come in a spirit of wanting to honor who you are as a human being.
Thank you.
Why don't you take some space to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure.
Talk about this incredible book. It almost doesn't. I know for me, this will sort of be like it's going to be like I have Austin Channing Brown's "I'm Still Here." Like y'all's book are going to go right together as like my Bible a little right now. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's so wonderful to be here with you all, and I'm really honored by what both Olivia and Becka said, just about feeling so connected to my experience. I was raised as a scientist in a super intellectual Black Christian family, and my PhD is in the sciences. And so when I decided to write a book that was like at least half memoir, I was petrified just because I was not trained in helping set the scene and bringing people along on my journey and sharing, helping people connect emotionally with my experiences. I mean, I could barely even do that for myself, much less write in a way that ushered people into that. And I love, being someone who is very much shaped by white patriarchy. I love perfection and dominance, and I don't like doing things that I'm not good at. And especially, I don't like publicly experimenting. It's like, okay, like a big part of me wanted to go get an MFA in creative writing real quick before I tried to write the book. Because I'm like, I know how to talk theory, I know how to talk data, and there is some of that in the book, well, quite a bit, right? But I'm not trained to basically write a narrative, write a story. And so I just remember really leaning into the sacred Black feminine, this connection with the divine, and saying, hey, this is your story. And so if I'm going to share it, you got to help me. And I remember I was living in Taos, New Mexico for most of 2020, the pandemic year, or the first pandemic year. And I would just go for 3-4 hour walks before I would sit down to write, because I wanted to just be as much in my body as possible before I even tried to share, how I felt in this particular context or how I felt in this encounter on my pilgrimage. And so it just feels very beautiful and honoring to hear that some of that work bears some fruit and people are experiencing the book in a way that's like really picturesque and emotionally connected. And so a big part of my journey has been piecing myself back together so that I can connect with my own emotions enough to even be able to express them. Because that was not allowed in my home growing up, and that was not allowed in the church spaces I grew up in, and that was not allowed. I mean, Black women aren't allowed to really be anything anywhere, and definitely not loud and emotional. And so, it's been really beautiful to start to weave myself back together with the divine. So I guess for people who are learning about the book now through this conversation, it's basically my journey of healing from white patriarchal religious conditioning and turning towards what I now call the sacred Black feminine, which is the God who is with and for Black women, because she is herself a Black woman, and it shares my journey walking 400 miles across central France in the middle of winter in search of some ancient Black Madonna statues in all these mountain villages, and the encounters that I have with each one of them and how they transformed and healed me and spoke directly to my pain as a Black woman, and also healed my identity and gave me hope as a Black woman. And so it's like a pilgrimage story. It's also got a lot of social science and theology and history, and got kind of a mix of it all. It's a joyful book, even though there are some intense parts. Yeah.
I'm on chapter 3 right now, and I'm having to go slowly, especially as a non-binary person, really in between, which I'm really grateful that you named in the book as well, regarding like your approach of naming the sacred as feminine and the as woman and the importance of that. As I'm identifying both with my mother's experience, but reckoning with my socialization as male, there's like these intense emotions coming up of like, it's like my body is like just in this posture of weeping. As there's empathy and probably because that there's still aspects of that relationship that can't be like I want it necessarily, as intimate as I want it, because of the boundaries that are necessary, but then also having that empathy of like, I don't think she has access to heal these parts of herself that are, patriarchal white supremacist system and white male God has imposed upon her body for 60 plus years.
Yeah.
And so maybe would you like to talk about for you why this image of God as Black woman was so instrumental to healing yourself?
Yeah. Even though I grew up in a Black family, even though I grew up in a lot of Black church spaces, I'm kind of this like hybrid. I grew up in a lot of white evangelical spaces because of where we were situated in our neighborhood, in our town. And then I also grew up in a lot of Black church spaces because my family is just basically Black Pentecostal royalty. And so I was always in those spaces too. But in both of those spaces, there was just a lot of white patriarchal religion. Especially because I was in Black Pentecostal spaces that are pretty conservative theologically. It's all about the holiness tradition. And so theologically, the two, white evangelicalism and the Black Pentecostal spaces I was in, were not that different, even though culturally they were quite different.
Yeah.
And so, but in both of those spaces, I learned to be afraid of a God who was distant, who was keeping tabs. If he paid any attention to me, it was to keep tabs. If he loved me at all, it was because he was so awesome that he was able to somehow not just conjure up the love, but like push down his disgust for me long enough through the sacrifice of his child to somehow sort of love me. But it's only because he's so awesome. And I'm, that he's somehow able to get past my humanity, And so, and then of course I was raised in part of the kind of holiness Black Pentecostal fasting tradition. I was raised to fast and pray for my future spouse starting when I was 5. So learning how to sort of like control my body, silence my body's feedback in the service of pleasing this God who was only going to give me good things if I was pious enough. Pious being like chaste sexually, thin, and looking as much as I could like the standards of white, like patriarchal beauty. And so I just grew up with all of that. And it wasn't until really my 30s that I started to like look at this connection between our understanding of the divine, sort of our spiritual imagination around who is sacred and who's profane, and how I was treated as a Black woman, first through Trayvon Martin's death and then the ensuing Black Lives Matter movement that really heightened my consciousness around Black Christ. But then when Trump got elected, I started to realize, okay, we also have a problem with the gender of Christ too. Like, I don't just hate white Christ, I also hate male Christ because I see how they intersect to be a white male God that basically makes it possible for someone like Trump to get elected, even though Black people, immigrants, disabled people, women, everybody is just getting thrown under the bus, right? So it's just like, okay, we have to completely rethink. And so that's what sent me on this journey towards God as a Black woman. Like, how do I find an image of the divine that looks like me, can relate to my experience? And I didn't have to look far. I mean, the Black Madonna was always there. I think because I grew up Protestant, it was like, ooh, those sketchy Catholics, they're not even Christian, and then also she's sort of like rogue Catholicism too. Like, most Catholics don't even really know who the Black Madonna is because she's so witchy and subversive, and they've tried to silence her. And so I just was like starting to look for images, and I found the Black Madonna, and I was immediately transformed. Like, I remember walking back from my mailbox in Durham, North Carolina, and I had like one of those like U-shaped driveways, you know, like a round. So I had, you know, you have to walk, it takes like 30 seconds to walk back to your house or whatever. And so I'm flipping through the books, these Black Madonna books that I ordered. It's like Trump's like getting inaugurated that week, you know. So I'm flipping through these books, and all of a sudden I just see the image, and immediately my entire, like, I realized I had been holding in my breath my whole life. My gut just like completely relaxed. My shoulders dropped. My jaw like unclenched itself. And I was just like, every single question that I've had since I was a little girl, trying to figure out how this good and loving God could possibly kill all the people in the Noah's Ark story. Every single question I've had since then is completely affirmed and seen in this one image. This is who God really is. And I can find myself in her body. I can find my divinity in her divinity. And so I spent a couple years reading and studying the Black Madonna, but eventually I was just like, I gotta go meet her, you know, like I just have to go. And so I found this, you know, there are about 450 Black Madonnas around the world. I did do short trips to go see like individual ones with like the patron saint of Costa Rica is La Negrita, the Black Madonna. So I went to go see her. She's one main like Black Madonna in Costa Rica, but everywhere you look in Costa Rica, you see her. Like people have these like little grottos, like very poor, out of the way, rural people have these grottos made. I call them garbage grottos. They're like made of like aluminum cans and bottles and like milk caps and everything. And they're these gorgeous shrines to her. So she's everywhere you look. But, so, you know, I would go see, you know, I went to do some individual ones, but then I was like, I just really want to go like spend time with the Black Madonna. And so I went to this region in France that's known for its devotion to her because it's a really old area that has had a devotion to like the dark goddesses of old, like Isis and Demeter and Cybele and everyone. And so all of her chapels are built on top of these old pagan sites. Because people just continued worshiping Isis. When the Catholic Church came and gentrified everything, they're like, okay, whatever. Like, clearly you're not cool with us worshiping Isis, so we'll just worship the Black Madonna. And they literally just had the temples built on, like the churches built on top of the existing temples. So this is an area where like it's so magical. The entire area is surrounded by volcanic rock mountains, and there's tons of hot springs in the area. That's another reason why there are a lot of Black Madonnas there, because people would go to be healed and they would encounter the Black Madonna. So it's just like really magical, out of the way place in France where there are like 40 Black Madonnas in a small area. So I went and I walked to 18 of them.
Wow.
Which was like such an adventure. Yeah. I'm not outdoorsy. So it was interesting.
You're not?
I'm not. No.
Reading your about your pilgrimage, that is a little surprising.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I mean, I actually call myself indoorsy. So it was really just me wanting to connect with the earth and my body. I mean, I guess I'm more outdoorsy now since then. You know, I was almost 4 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm just someone who really felt robbed as a Black woman by the way that white supremacy, domestic servitude, enslavement, environmental racism have just robbed my relationship to the earth. And so I was like, so many of these Black Madonnas are deeply connected to the earth. Many of them were like found in a forest or found in a spring or found in the earth. And many of them are made from like trees or rock from the earth. And so I was just like, part of this journey is connecting with the Great Mother, who's also a Black woman, the actual earth, and then also my own body and the land on which these Black Madonnas have come from. And so it was just sort of like, but yeah, I mean, there are parts in the story where I like kind of talk about how, I was not super trained on how to navigate, like how to like climb mountains, do backcountry backpacking, stay warm when it's wet. Like,
But you did it. Like that's
I did
just
it, sure.
yeah.
Yeah, but and I got some coaching. You know, it was just a matter of me learning to listen. Yeah. I mean, my best friend's the head of Outdoor Afro for New England. So I had people who could give me advice, but I was also just like, I'm on a spiritual journey. Okay. Like, don't bog me down with like gear. You know, this is spiritual. And she's like, okay, good luck with that. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, we need to teach you how to like build a fire. We need to teach you how to like build a fortress, like a shelter if you need that.
You have to survive.
Exactly. I'm like, it's spiritual. If I perish, I perish. You know, like just kind of dramatic. I'm a Leo sun, moon, and rising. So yeah.
But you just
I am very much an outdoor person, but one of those that you went in during where you like it was like 18 miles up or something, and then you found the factory that built.
The distillery.
I was like,
that was a 42-mile
that it was
walk.
18 miles.
Yeah. Well, it was a 42-mile walk total, and I think in one day I had to do 21 miles. Yeah, and it was all uphill.
Right? Yes.
So I was just unprepared. Like I had run out of water. Now I have like a water filter, you know, like a portable water filter, but I didn't have anything like that back then. And so I would, you know, now I know I could have like melted some like snow, like, but I didn't even know how to do any of that. But I did encounter like just in the nick of time, you know, this like essential oil distillery.
Yeah, that was it. Essential oil distillery.
Yeah. And they like, you know, gave me water and they gave me some salve for my knees, and it was really wonderful. Yeah, there were a lot of experiences like that where it's just like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to get home tonight, or I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. And then a random French person who didn't even speak English would be like, help me, you know, because I don't speak any French either. So there's a lot going on.
Whoa. Like, okay. So I know that, like, I feel like so much of the answer is, God's a black woman, the divine feminine. But literally, how did you sit and I am terrified for you, and you're here and it's over and you're safe. But I'm also thinking about a time I had to hike in the mountains and the sun went down and I was like, oh dear Lord, they're going to have to fly the helicopter in here. I'm never doing this again. No.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this trip taught me about myself is that, and it was really fun to encounter this within myself and also with the divine, I'm extremely wild. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm not for a lot of people. Like only someone like me, given my context and how controlling it was, only someone like me would even be able to break free from that. Like there's tons of people who never leave the plantation because it's actually really hard to leave the plantation. And you have to be kind of wild and a little bit nuts to even think you can do it, to even think I'm too sacred for this and I'm going to act on that, you know, a lot of other, and so part of it's just the wildness of my personality. And it's been really fun to encounter that in the divine, because like the Black Madonna is super wild and like unpredictable in some ways too. And you see that a lot in like the Black Madonna iterations within Voodoo. Urzuli Dantor is also the Black Madonna, you know, and she's just like wild and fun and sexual and cannot be contained, you know? And so that's been really fun.
Can you say that name again?
Urzuli Dantor. She's like one of the most famous deities or like images of the divine in Voodoo, Hoodoo. And she's actually the Black Madonna of Poland. They're the same. And so you see these like really cool connections between different, like the Black Madonna is so interfaith, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was gonna say that confused me a lot, I guess, because typically for me, I would think Black Madonna may be some part of Africa, but I was like super
Also,
confused
yes.
with it being like, oh my God, it's the European centric, but we're also divesting from white male God.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the Black Madonna is just a portal into the sacred Black feminine. And the sacred Black feminine transcends all race and continents and all that stuff. And so some of the work I've done with my Patreon community since my pilgrimage is, how does the Black Madonna connect with Oshun? How does the Black Madonna open us up to Kali of Hinduism, right? It's like this, she's just a portal. Yeah. But going back to what I was saying about the wildness is, so I learned a lot about myself, that I'm just really wild. And then also I learned that all the fear that I experience as a Black woman is not due to uncertainty. Like, I'm not afraid of where I'm going to sleep tonight when I'm out on pilgrimage. I'm not afraid of, a bear coming to get me or something like that. The fear I have is due to white supremacist and patriarchal structure. So out on my pilgrimage, right? Like, uncertainty, natural challenges, being in the natural world and not knowing if I have the skills to handle all that, like, that's not scary to me. What's scary is my racist colleagues at Duke, in the name of Jesus, coming for me during a department meeting. And so I just explained away, gosh, like, I'm pretty good with uncertainty. I'm pretty good with ambiguity. I'm pretty good with questions. Like, those are things that, and I'm pretty good with adventure and like not knowing what's going to happen next, even in the physical world. Which I think speaks to like the heart of what it means to be human, right? We're not supposed to always be like afraid that we're not going to have what we need. Like, if I don't have what I need, it's because of capitalism. It's not because because the universe is hostile. The universe is not hostile. The universe is always providing. It's always, and so I was on my pilgrimage, and it's like random people would just like give me rides or help me find a way home, or, and it's like, okay, that's how the world's supposed to work.
Yes.
Wow.
So, and when we do feel that uncertainty, other people come in with wisdom. This is my experience. This is what I know. I can help you navigate, And so it's just...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Such a lesson in the individual to the collective.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
The world's not scary. It's like white male God is scary.
Yes.
That, I think, especially as I continue to progress through the book, like, I was like, I just want to buy this for everybody, every Black woman that I know. Because, like, I've never heard it put that way. I'm not afraid of uncertainty. Like, and then it makes sense as you're telling some of the memoir pieces of your story. Like, you've had to be adaptive to sort of a lot of unpredictability in your life. And so, of course, like, this aspect of wildness comes, but then the things that have actually imposed harm upon you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think spiritually, I was taught in these white patriarchal religious spaces, I was taught certainty and steadfastness are holy. And so we don't ask questions, even when we're given data that invites curiosity and invites a revisioning. We're taught, nope, I'm just going to believe. So, I mean, I just remember even when I was like, when I got kicked out of Sunday school when I was 7 for asking how could a good and loving God kill everybody in Noah's flood, the response was, God is good all the time, God is good. Okay, but this looks violent. Okay, but God is good. Also, basically, there's something wrong with you if you can't toe the party line. And it's an unfaithfulness, it's a disobedience. I remember my mom used to call disobedience witchcraft, which is just an interesting pairing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I was always taught, you just obey, you just stick to the line. And it's like, and if I'm not trusting God, it's because I there's something inherently rotten about me. It's God's always trustworthy, even though I was getting data and having experiences that suggested otherwise.
And I'm sitting here saying, wow, like, that's not my, like, I'm like, yes, like, yes. I need to change the wow from yes, because it everything you're saying, I'm like, yep, live that. And it's interesting. I don't know if you're having the sort of the same reaction, Olivia. I grew up at the intersections of, I say, Jehovah's Witness and Black church and also white evangelicalism. But just like, again, I'm having that same experience of just going down the list, check. Remembering like the purity pieces for me, especially when like my attraction to men surfaced, like all of a sudden I was to be watched and I wasn't doing something right, that or somehow I wasn't faithful enough. But yeah, Olivia, you were shaking your head, so I was like, what's going on over there?
So my religious experience is so interesting because, like, if I were to list all the ones I've been through, I went to Catholic school, so I'm immersed in Catholicism. When I was 9, then I was AME Methodist. I've been CME Methodist. In the 9th grade, my parents became Mormons. They believe they're so everybody in my family did but me, and they believe they're the only true church. And just something in my 13-year-old self just couldn't accept that. So I never joined. So I was outcast, because of that. So that was through high school. And then I got to college and was like, I'm not dealing with any of it. And then right out of college, I discovered evangelicalism. And so that took me down a whole other journey. But the constant theme across all of them is the turning off of critical thinking. And one thing I will say about myself, I am innately intellectually curious. So like yourself, I have journals out there in my garage back when I was 11 and 12 years old, asking questions like this doesn't make any sense. Like, so he killed all the people. And then growing up in Germany, my mother took me to concentration camps. I've stood in the gas chambers. And it's like, but according to my church, Jewish Jesus sent all the Jews in Auschwitz to hell because they didn't pray the sinner's prayer, but he's a Jew. But they didn't say the sinner's prayer, but it's their fault because they were born in Poland or, Europe in the 40s. And it's just like, it just didn't make sense to me. But, well, that shows doubt. That shows a lack of faith. And so one of the mottos that I have right now is I have learned to lean into mystery when certainty is elusive. And I am so comfortable with I don't know. Because all those years that I said, I know that I know that I know, I didn't really know. I was indoctrinated. And so I began to question, and then 2015 happened, and my church, the same church that said that, Bill Clinton was immoral, and if he is not faithful to his wife, he can't lead the country, they were all of a sudden okay with a thrice divorced, genital grabbing adulterer, and then things went south from there. And it just got to the point where I could no longer reconcile it. But I had to let go of so much fear of acknowledging that I don't belong. I don't believe this stuff anymore. I worked in a very evangelical company. So that's why all of the stuff that we're opening up with prayer meeting, But then there's all this subtle racism. And the other thing that I awakened to that you address in your book is I thought I'm in this multicultural church. The final church that I was in was probably like 85% white, Black. And then I was at a company where I was the only Black person. There was one Asian, everybody else was. And so it's like, they're open-minded. We're in this post-racial era. And then when I found out, oh no, you were just the acceptable Negro. You were just the acceptable Negro. When I started questioning stuff, all of a sudden, it's like all the guns turned on me. And all of a sudden, I've gone from pet model employee to threat just because I'm questioning. And so, yeah, I experienced all of that. But I just came to a place where I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. And I have more peace with that than I do with trying to contort myself to believe that a Jewish Messiah sent 6 million Jews to hell because they didn't say the sinner's prayer. Or some of the other things. It's so much that you covered that is just my story. The purity culture is my story. Like you, I've been in the black church version of, Pentecostal speaking tongues, all of that. Mormonism, that's I could write a book just on those 4 years. I have been exposed to all of it. And I have more peace in the last 5 years since I have left than I did the prior 50 when I was in it. So.
Yeah, freedom is not free, but it's so worth it.
It is. But
I think it's really, really, really hard for a long time. And I think most people can't, and like the plantation is always throwing carrots at you to try to get you to come back, and because you're dealing with separation from friends, family, spiritual spaces, potentially like access to resources like health insurance and an income and all that good stuff. And it's like, it's so easy to turn back. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people really struggle to get free, because there's everything in our society is designed to keep us on the plantation, and everything in our faith tradition is designed to keep us on the plantation. And it's really, really, it's a wilderness for a long time. And we aren't trained for the wilderness. Mm-hmm. We're trained for the suburbs.
That's a whole word right there.
I was going to say.
Mm-hmm. So it was really powerful for me to be out in the wilderness and discover my true self there, the wildness of myself, and be like, this is actually what my soul has always longed for. And not to say that there weren't lots of tears and trauma therapy sessions and all the things, but it's like, this is what I've been longing for my whole life. This sacred wilderness space where literally anything could happen next spiritually. And yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why people don't ever get there. Mm-hmm. I think more people share their stories. I think sometimes it's helpful for people to hear other people's stories, and that,
that is extremely helpful. Yeah. And that's one of the things that's been hard for me, because there's still like, I will have discussions in certain environments that I won't have in certain other ones, because I'm not ready for the blowback. Like right now, some of this stuff is still tender. And, I don't want to deal with all the incoming fire and everybody's opinion and, it's a lot. But when I think of probably one of the most touching things that happened to me in the last 5 years is when my youngest child, when we started to pull away from all this, and she said, I'm so glad you're where you are, because I stopped believing this stuff in middle school. But I was afraid to say anything. And she's like, I've been questioning it since middle school, and I just, it touched my heart in one sense, but then I understand why she was afraid, because, when you're raised in that environment, it's almost like it's an insult to your honor if your children don't toe the line. I recall that story from the book where you talked about the pastor whose daughter had gotten pregnant. And that made me cry. Why don't you tell that part of the story? You can do it better than I can.
Sure. Yeah. That's such a poignant story. Because it really just shows like how patriarchy works. Like you're responsible for all the people who are under you too. But I think I was 6 years old when this happened. And we had a pastor who teenage but adult daughter, I think she was like 18 or 19 at the time, got pregnant, even though she wasn't married. And so they kind of like paraded her in front of the church and essentially put her on trial in front of the church. And of course, the guy was nowhere around. So I just remember being there as a 6-year-old, just so perplexed, like not really understanding what was going on, but noticing that this was like essentially a lynching, like I felt her shame. I didn't understand why the guy wasn't there. Even though I didn't really understand the biology of sex, I was like, I have a mommy and a daddy. Where's the daddy? Like, there's got to be a daddy, like just noticing that this guy wasn't there. And then afterwards, we had dinner or lunch with a fellow parishioner who was like a family physician. And apparently he was, I just remember him sharing so openly. I actually fact checked this with my mom when I was writing the book a couple of years ago, just to make sure I was remembering it correctly. And she confirmed this is how, you remembered it accurately. But he was like telling us that he had, the pastor had invited him in to come and examine the daughter and determine if she really had sex or not. So then this physician is telling us at lunch that he checked her hymen and confirmed that it had not been penetrated, which says everything about like how illiterate he is about sexuality, because it's totally like hymen has nothing to do with like really anything in terms of virginity, and virginity is a social construct. But anyways, this father pastor had invited the physician to come in and examine his adult daughter against her consent. Or maybe she consented, but in a patriarchal sort of sense where she had to say yes, And then he's telling us about it at lunch, saying she actually didn't really have sex because the hymen is still intact. So then he confirmed, he basically not confirmed, but concluded that they were having sex and then there was just semen flying around. Like, I remember that term. There was just semen flying around. And I just remember as a little child being like so overwhelmed and terrorized in that moment at that lunch table. And I just remember thinking, because I had just graduated kindergarten, and I was like, we did stranger danger training, and no one's allowed to touch your private parts if you don't give them permission. I don't understand why he's touching her private parts, and I don't understand why he's talking about her private parts. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like so confused as a child. And then my mom just said, like, see, look at, this is what happens. If you have sex, God will reveal it to everyone, because God sees everything. And even if you sort of have sex, God will get you pregnant, and then your dad will lose his job, and then everybody will be talking about, as just a 6-year-old, I was like inducted into what I call white male God's liturgy of fear. Like, this is how he controls us. This is how he keeps us in line, is that he makes a spectacle of anybody who dares to do something different.
And that pastor resigned, right? The pastor?
No, I didn't go into it. He offered to resign.
He offered to resign. Okay.
In the end, the elder board forgave him and let him stay.
Forgave him.
Yeah. So in the end, he stayed on. But the key part was they were looking for his resignation, and they wanted him to know that they had the power over him because he had failed. And again, the sort of patriarchal, like, we are God and we're going to decide your moral standing, and your moral authority is outside of you completely. And also, you don't have moral authority if you can't control everyone who's around you. And so it's just like this perfect picture of how white male God works, and I kind of connected to my own story where I learned that discipleship, spiritual leadership is like whipping everyone around you into shape. Whipping yourself and then whipping everyone around you into shape. So I was like, I had a little accountability group that I like sort of forced people to be a part of when I was in college. And that's what I call myself, white male God in blackface. Because I'm like, I was doing everything white male God wanted me to do. White male God is not just in white men, and white male God is not just in white people and men. But I remember just chastising them. Y'all are dating the wrong people. You're drinking too much. You're in the football frat. That's not holy. Just stuff like that. And it's like, wait a second. What was I trying to do? None of my business. Nobody asked me to be in charge of them spiritually. I was just, because that's what I had been taught. I'm the leader. I'm the leader of the campus ministry. So that means it's my job to make sure that nobody's out there getting drunk at frats on Friday night. And it's like, what? But that's what we're taught. So it's really powerful for me to encounter the virgin warrior, who's this like 16th century Black Madonna who just completely redefines everything we thought we knew about purity, and to like be a part of her process of loving by letting go of myself, letting go of others, not needing to control. And she's beautiful. And I did walk 18 miles in the rain to see her.
And she's the 3 foot tall one, right?
No, she's approximately 3 feet. I think she's pretty typical for like a 14th, 15th, or 16th century Black Madonna. The little tiny ones are the medieval ones. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, she's kind of average. Some of them are life size, but she's not. She's like 3 feet. I'm not sure which one you're talking about that's 3 feet tall, but
I will
it's
have to
okay.
report
It's
back.
okay because there's a bunch in them. Yeah, it's not like I don't expect you. This isn't a test. I was just wondering if you. Yeah, no. I was just wondering if there was one in particular that you were thinking of. But yeah.
I was on my walk today, and just one of the features that you had pointed out as I was listening, you were like, this Madonna is taller than the average. She stands about 3 feet, and then you were describing her stature, and I might have remembered something about some armor as well.
Okay. You're talking about the God of Harriet, the Black Madonna of Mulan. That Joan of Arc prayed to, because you're in chapter 3. Yeah, and that's the one I talk about. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so she's like she's pretty tall for a medieval one. Yeah, because she's old. So so a lot of the medieval ones are a lot smaller. They're like a foot, 18 inches, but she's like 3 feet tall. And then on top of it, she's got this like whole kind of production around her. And so in order to see her, you actually have to look up. I actually just went to go visit her last month when I was in France. I went to visit her 3 times actually, because she's only like an hour from where I live. And like, you can't even get a good picture of her without like a selfie stick, because she's so tall. She's so propped up. Yeah. And she's like she's covered in black paint. She's wooden, but she's covered in black paint. So she kind of looks like she's got armor on. And she's just like this fierce Black Madonna that Joan of Arc just loved. There were 2 Black Madonnas that Joan of Arc like really loved, and she's one of them. And the other one's in Orleans. Yeah. So Joan of Arc went to pray to her often before she went to battle, which is kind of cool.
Just also struck how we're grounded. This is also art.
Totally.
This concept of art as liberation just kind of popped into my brain. I want to be respectful of your time and your energy, but maybe thinking through that vein of art and liberation, what might be some thoughts that you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. What's been amazing is how much art has stimulated my spiritual imagination. I write, I think early on in the book, that like theology is imagination. Like if we can't imagine something, we can't even begin to believe it. And so for me, seeing the Black Madonna was huge for my spiritual imagination, because I could finally see, okay, here is a God that is sacred and Black and female. And the Black Madonnas are all art too, right? I mean, they're sacred images, but they're sacred images of art. And I have become so connected to Black art, contemporary Black art, and also in history, and have used so many images by contemporary Black artists to infuse my spiritual imagination, whether they're figural and they look explicitly like, so there are people like Harmonia Rosales, for example, who's like reimagining a lot of the old paintings and putting God as a Black female God in those paintings. And so you might be familiar with her work. So there are people like her that are doing work that's like subversive in a sort of on the nose kind of way, even though it's also really subversive. And then there are people who are doing work that's just like a lot more like just not super figurative, a lot more abstract. But even those folks, I'm starting to see like sacredness in their work and the sacredness of what a Black body can do when it decides to create something, and just how like divine that is. And so it's been really fascinating to connect with Black artists, contemporary Black artists, be so inspired by their work. And then I probably have 10 to 15 emails from Black artists who say, your writing has inspired me to make this piece, for example. And so and the people who are listening won't be able to see this, but I'll turn my computer to show you. There's an artist, B. Robert Moore, who about like a year and a half ago messaged me and said, it's because of you that I'm thinking about a Black trans Christ. I'm about to paint a Black trans Christ. It's because of your writing. And so when he told me that, we're friends and through like social media and everything. And so I said, okay, well, whenever you paint it, if you can, give me a chance to buy it first. And he's way out of my price range, but he made it accessible for me. And I did like a 6-month plan. So I have his Black trans Christ here in my living room. You guys can see it across the way. And he's just an example of one artist out of probably 15 who finds my work exciting to them. And so it kind of just makes me think, gosh, it's almost like we're in our own little Harlem Renaissance, where like the poets and the theologians and the visual artists and the musicians are all hanging out together and learning from each other and inspiring each other. And that feels so healing to me. Like I'm not doing this work alone. Like I actually just have to participate in the way that I am called to, which is like a lot of writing. But I think of myself as a weaver because I integrate so well. And then I can let people like B. Robert, or I can let people like Harmonio Rosales, or I can let people like Delita Martin, whose image is on the cover of my book, do their visual artwork and allow that to feed me. And we're kind of in this thing. And so I think of art as spirituality, and I think it awakens me, and it's so powerful and so beautiful. And I would never have been able to value it like I do now without the sacred Black feminine, because the sacred Black feminine has taught me to relinquish my like over linear, over educated, like hyper goal oriented brain and start to value the spirals in life. And art is like, the best art is just trapped in that spiral, which is life, and it's so beautiful and so powerful. And I'm just, yeah. And each of those Black Madonnas, I mean, many of them have been stolen. Many of them are at risk of being stolen because they're so valuable on the art market. And so one of the Black Madonnas in my book that I talk about was stolen and was, gone for like 12, 15 years and had been resold 7 or 8 times. And by the time they found her again, the village had to buy her back. And so, because they're like gorgeous, and many of them they're all antiques. And many of them are 1,500 years old and belong in, museum worthy. Oh, yeah. And so people steal them because they're just in these like little like village chapels. Usually the door's not locked. Usually there's nobody there. And so someone could just come and steal them. And that's what's happened. Yeah.
Except for that one that you touched, that you went over the road.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say that. I was like, well, you are art. Yeah. You're also like back to the wild, because I was like, I was on the edge of my seat.
That was a great opening story. That was, you talk about reeling the reader in from the beginning. It's like, y'all need
to go get the book. We're not going to tell you that story on here. Y'all go get the book.
Get it.
And it's funny because, I've been back to France twice for a total of 16 weeks since I was on that pilgrimage. And that's what Mauriac, I still haven't gone back to Mauriac. I'm like, I don't know, because I've gone back to many of the Black Madonnas, the same ones, but I'm like, oh man, if there was a cop on the beat that day who saw me now, they would remember me because I totally I'm like, and these little village. I mean, Mauriac's not that big. And there are not a lot of Black people. So I'm like, I don't think I should go back there, at least for a while, because they're probably still looking for me. But yeah, there's that one, the Black Madonna of Mauriac, who's from the 6th century, found in the woods in the 6th century. So she's probably actually even older than that, because usually when they're that old, they're literally just they're just an ancient Isis that somebody found in the woods, or like they're an ancient Sybil or an ancient, Artemis or something like that. So she's probably twice that old.
Wow.
She's probably 3,000 years old. So she's real old. And then the white Black Madonna is the one who is also in like a Fort Knox sort of situation. And I'll let, I don't know how many of your readers are white women, but there's a whole chapter about white women.
Yes. I remember that
And
one.
we always encourage our white-bodied listeners, go get your education.
Yes.
Yeah, my editor, because my publisher is HarperCollins, and so my editor is white. It was a diverse editorial team, but my lead editor is white, and she was like, okay, like I think you should say something to white women because white women are going to be drawn to this book, and I was like, all right, like, and then when I sent her the chapter of like, it was like, I'm not sure if that's what she was expecting, but I was just like, and you're the problem. So I was like, she was like, well, I just want you to say something directly to white women. And I was like, okay, well, this is what I have to say. Like, you are white male God most of the time. And and so if you want to be part of this, you got to get into formation.
Yep.
And so, yeah, like it was pretty funny because she wanted me to say something in chapter 2 to white women. And I was like, no. I'll say something to white women.
Right there.
Yeah, but it ended up being like chapter 10 or something where I was just like, okay.
And you guys are in for a treat when you get to that story because she ties it into a Madonna figure, and then she ties it's a very interesting story. The one final thing that I just want to commend you for that you mentioned early on, and I never thought about that as a doctoral student. A PhD. A doctor of philosophy. You have to write a thesis and you're used to all this scientific writing. What stood out to me about this was the narrative writing. And I never made that connection that in academia, that's not the type of writing you normally do. So I don't know what you did, but you nailed it on the narrative storytelling. Because I'm a person who, like, at any given time is reading 4 or 5 books. And I downloaded the sample chapter and I was in right then. I mean, from the moment, because you started with that caper and it was the hook and the fish and you reeled the reader in and you wove that narrative throughout. So you did a masterful job of telling a compelling narrative story that was very relatable.
Thank you. I think it's so encouraging to hear that, especially from a Black woman. I mean, I wrote the book for Black women, and I just want Black women to feel seen through this book. But I feel like any art that comes out in this book is a testament to the healing journey that I've been on, because I the more I integrate as a human and the more I connect with my body and the artist within me, the more I'm able to offer that to the world. And I just think for so long, I just had one note: science, 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 tradition, consensus, rationality. And it's really the sacred Black feminine that's taught me how to dwell in possibility and whimsy and mysticism. And those were all things. I mean, I went to the top boarding school in the country. I went to an Ivy League college. I got a PhD, graduated with honors, was a Ford Foundation fellow, all these things. I was on this path where I never could have even valued a walk in the woods, much less living in the woods. And so it says a lot about just how much I've healed, which is really encouraging. And I think it shares a lot about just what humanity is. It's the mixture of science and art. That's what it means to be human. And the sacred feminine is what connects us with that art, because toxic masculinity is just trying to kill us. So yeah, it's been really fun to
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for being you. Thank you for being wild. Thank you for choosing healing, and then for the audacity to share that healing boldly with the world. If you want to continue learning from Dr. Christena Cleveland, you can join her Patreon community. Are there other ways that we should tell our listeners to be in contact and relationship with you?
Yeah. We're starting in 2 weeks. We're starting the God as a Black Woman Freedom Journal, which is going to be a bi-weekly newsletter. It's free to just resource people. If you want to just keep growing in this journey. towards a world where all women and all Black people are sacred and free. So we'll be sharing that, so you can go to my website and get connected to that free newsletter. And we're also in mid-April launching a virtual Black Madonna pilgrimage to all the Black Madonnas and God as a Black woman. And so people can join in on that too, which will be like a really fun, transformative experience in a group of other pilgrims. So, and then hopefully next year we'll have in-person events if that's possible, just in light of
this
all
pandemic life.
Yeah. Totally. So we're going to do virtual for now, which will actually be really powerful and wonderful in its own way.
You are my peace. Oh, you are my peace. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yo, that was our show. Thanks for listening to Permission to Be. Thank you to our guests. So if you want more information, head on over to permissiontobepodcast.com to check out the show notes, get some more information on our guests that we post over there. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, leave a rating. If there's somebody that you want to see on this podcast telling their story, we also want to hear from you. So make sure to connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, Permission to Be Podcast, and we'll see you soon.